Hello and good morning. We're going to be working on the Twitch TV API again. All right. Last time I set up for you a basic template or showed you kind of how I wanted that to get broken down, but didn't show you any specifics on that, which is because I want you to make your own decisions on how to lay that out. You're supposed to be working through and growing in this process, and I just realized that I don't look so bad in a tie, right? Like that, by the way. Anyway, I digress. You're supposed to be going ahead and growing as a coder and a programmer, making sure that you're at least able to envision what you want and then be able to create that. So I'm only going to be showing you how to do functionality here, focusing on JavaScript. Um, let's remember that I'm going to tell you this again, but they actually have these little like icon pictures that are up to 300 by 300 square. You can check out other pens to see what other people have done, and they've even used CSS animations very well. So these are all things you can go through and explore on your own to add into to make a better product. Again, for my students, all right, that are watching, the point for us is going to be, let's just stick to the workflow of how to use the API and how to nest the API calls. Okay, so you're going to have your get JSON, and then your Ajax call are going to be nested, and there's that structure, that flow that I'm focused in on. All right, so that's where we're going to start off with here. Now I'm going to share my screen and go back through what we have here. Oh no, there's that whole thing. Remember, so Twitch here, you have to be signed into Twitch TV or get an account. Once you do that, you can go into your settings. All right. And once you go into your settings, you can go into, I'll actually show you. Let's see if this, you go to settings and then connections tab here. And you scroll all the way to the bottom and you can register your application. That's where you need to be. And that's how you get your API key. Now, the API key itself is called a client ID. So that's they're calling their API key. It's a client ID. Let's take a look at the Twitch API documentation. And really, as with any API documentation, you really should be able to go through and read this. And as you get better and better at this, you won't actually need to come and watch a video on it. You should just be able to come in, read the documentation, and then use that API. Or at least you should be getting close to that level at this point in time. So here's your generic query string parameter right here. And this you can use with the shorthand jQuery get JSON. Okay, you can use this with the get JSON parameter in jQuery. Notice they want Twitch TV .kraken, which is their standard. That's your starting point here. And then from there, you're going to select an option such as users, or what else do they put on there? You can use channel. Or streams you can use as well. And they're going to give you different data based on what is right here. All right. And then this right here, so if that's a user, so that would be a username. And you can put a username after whatever this parameter is right here. All right. And then remember from our last video, all right, we have a question mark, which means that we're going to be feeding it some specific data or some parameter. And the parameter that we're going to be feeding is the client ID that you get from going into your settings, connections, and going all the way to the bottom and registering your application. All right, and you're going to get a client ID. So what I did is I came over here, and I'll kind of go through this stuff again. I was actually testing this before to kind of preview what this is. Anyway, so here's my client ID. Obviously get your own so that we make sure it works. I also copy and pasted an array. All right, so I have an array here right from freeCodeCamp, and this array has the actual usernames, all right, for these streamers. All right, and then I copy and pasted this right here, which was the Twitch TV API. And then I'm going to show you right here, the two we're going to be using is going to be streams and channels. And I'm going to be testing with freeCodeCamp, okay? And this is where we're going to be starting off with. And then there's my client ID right here. And you're going to have your own. The reason I did this so I can copy and paste these later on. So if you haven't done this yet, you're just going to pause the video, jump over to Twitch TV, get your client ID, get yourself an array of users. Now, you don't need to use this array of users. You can make a separate API call. So let's say you wanted to get people that you subscribe to or that subscribe to you. You can use this API documentation to figure out which one of these things right here, one of these parameters you can use, and they're going to send back an object of data. All right. I'm going to be using the get JSON here to begin with, and I'm going to show you what these different API calls look like. And I'm going to be using freeCodeCamp first, and then I'm also going to be using one of the streamers that freeCodeCamp gets us that's always on playing StarCraft. So we're going to be using that one to test our functionality and console logging that out. The only other thing I did is I added this plugin here. This is JSON View. You can just Google, Chrome plugins or whatever browser you're using, plugins to view JSON data. And all that does is it cleans up the JSON data for you, so that way it is more intuitive and looks a little nicer. All right, so that way as we're going through and taking a look at our data itself, we're going to need to access that data. We want to make sure we're accessing that data correctly. So that's where we're at right now. Let's go back into the pen. And what I have, you can see I haven't changed much from our last project. Most of this is simple copy and paste just about, with the blocks themselves, which are the same that I've done previously. A simple little spacer there, and then the body with the background that is fixed. Okay, and the background is fixed just like that. All right, and that's sort of what I wanted. All right. And if you don't want the background fixed, you can always take off this fixed parameter. And you can also take a look at this a little closer. I've also used a background array and showed you how to do that in jQuery. So if you want to use that use the freeCodeCamp as a trigger for when they're online, you can do that as well. Let's take a look at what I've done in the HTML. All right. All I have here is a container fluid. Then I have my div class spacer, which is just the padding of that 3%. Okay. Followed by another block. All right. The block on mine is just this right here. Again, you've seen my other videos, so you should know where this is all coming from. I have an H1 tag here for Twitch TV JSON API. And then here is the important part right in here. All right, so I created an anchor tag, and then we have href, and then here is the Twitch TV. All right, so this is the link. So the link to the anchor tag is Twitch TV / wherever you want to go. In this case, freeCodeCamp. Now remember, I want to open in a new window, so you want to add target blank in there as well. All right. So once we have that, I'm going to have a H3 that has freeCodeCamp. All right. And then space ... So it looks like this when the page is loading, and this is an active link. And this link, if I hold the cursor there, you can see at the bottom left of my screen, it's going to send me to twitchtv.freeCodeCamp, and that will open in a new window. And in this span, so we're still inside of the anchor tag. I created a span with an ID. Now, remember the ID we can access or we can grab with jQuery, and we can overwrite that by adding in that pound sign or hashtag. In this case, the ID I used was FCC for freeCodeCamp, and we can type that in with the .html. Okay, so if you remember that, I'm going to go over that again, and that's going to overwrite this span or whatever this ID is. If that was like an H3 ID, it would overwrite that little piece of code as well. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm just going to use a simple if-else. If they're online, put is online. If they're offline, I'm just going to put is offline. So that's what that little space is for. And you can see that's just this first little block right there. Then I added a spacer in. Now, obviously, why do I do it like this? Well, it's because I've done all of mine like that, and I know that I'm going to have a bunch here that's going to scroll down and down and down. You could also add in a simple nav bar that floats on top. So when you're down inside of here, if you have a ton of users, you can click quickly to get to the top. Or if you're going to organize this differently, mine is organized from top to bottom. If you want to organize yours more left to right, you can do that as well. So my structure here, you can use this the same way. here is my div, my block, my second block. Then next thing I did is I added a row. So I have this broken up into rows, okay? So I have my row. And then all I have inside this row are 3 columns. Now these are Bootstrap classes. So let's make sure we're in CSS, Bootstrap, and make sure you have Bootstrap 3.6. Okay, this was the last one that I know that works outside of the, I think we're in an alpha or beta right now currently. So as I'm making this video, and I know 3.3.6 works. So you want to make sure you bring in Bootstrap, and when you quick add it here, it brings in the latest one, not necessarily the one that is working. So we want to overwrite this. In the JavaScript, we're going to be using jQuery, so you can quick add jQuery. And again, instead of, I'm trying to save time by not typing this stuff out here. And so again, these are Bootstrap column medium 4. Remember, your columns have to add up to 12. Since 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12, we've neatly divided this whole div here into 3 different sections. All right, and each section has an ID. So we have an ID user that says user. Then the next column is ID status, and I have a status. The next is an ID game, and it has the game that they are playing or streaming. Okay. Now, this is not the best way to do it. I'm going to tell you this right now. This is not the best way to do it, because all I'm going to do is append each of these columns. So I'm going to append something underneath, underneath, underneath. And then I'm going to move on to the next user and then append it underneath. Then go on to the next user and append it underneath. So if you're going to be putting in pictures as well, you're going to have to think of what size of the image are you going to put in. And the append is not going to allow you to line that up that way without any additional HTML that you're going to have to append as well. And if that doesn't make sense right now, one, you can just come ask me if you're in the room with me, or 2, you can send me a message, or 3, you can actually just do a little bit of research. There's a bunch of other examples that do that very, very well, and it's not that difficult. But for right now, I just want you to focus in on the actual JavaScript itself. And then once we figure out how to get it working, then you can come back and make it really nice, especially if this is going in a personal portfolio that you're going to be using for a college or a job or something like that, and you really want it to pop and look nice. I would definitely be adding in some more stuff besides just this basic little single page scrolling here. All right. So at this point, we have our columns. And then again, just make sure you can see where the divs line up to. All right. And then I just added another spacer at the bottom so I can scroll through. That right there is my, all the way back to my top, my container fluid, and that ends my body. All right. Pretty soon we're going to be jumping into and actually using a text editor to do all this stuff. So it'll be quicker for me to type this stuff out, which would be nice. So again, I have my generic anchor tags, by the way. If you notice they're white, how did I do that? Well, just set the A or anchor tag, the color to white. Even though you can also have on it, you can set the rollover and all kinds of other stuff as well. So you can, again, look that stuff up and add more of that in as well if you'd like. Okay, now there's our setup. We have to know we're using 3 tags, right? So we have 3 tags we're going to use: user, game, status. We also have one that's called FCC that we're going to use in the beginning. All right, so I'm just going to start off with this FCC tag, and we're going to play with the API itself. So what does that mean? Well, we've already enabled jQuery, and we've gotten that stuff ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start my function. And remember, I'm going to use a shorthand for this, all right, which is just going to be function. Remember, so you have function, right? And there is my entire program in this one jQuery function. You don't have to worry about the document ready. You can use the shorthand for that. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by doing a get JSON API call here. And again, I told you you can use the shorthand for this, and that's what we're going to use. I'm going to clear the console log in case there was something else in there. So all we have to do is jQuery, the shortcut for get JSON. And again, JSON's capitalized here. And what it's going to look for is it's going to look for an address, right? And the address that we want, I've copied this one down, is API https://api.twitch.tv. All right, I'm going to make sure this is right. That's why I copy and pasted it. And you can add different things in here. I'm starting off with channels to show you what that JSON data looks like. Then I'll move to some other ones as well. You know what? Since we're going to do that, let's just do the default one from the documentation here, which is users, because that's really where you would start at anyway. And then you're going to add in the username, which is freeCodeCamp. And then again, we wanted to look for some data, right? Which is that question mark. And the data we wanted to look for is client ID, and there's my client ID. Now you want to add in your client ID, obviously. Then after we send this out, we're going to say done. Once that's done, we're going to run a simple function. Right? So we're going to run a function, not a function, but a function. We'll run a function, and that function we're going to run is going to use the data that we get back, this data object here. So we want to use that data object, so I'm just going to call it data. And now we're inside of our first API call. If we want to see what we're getting here, we can just do a simple console.log. Once we console log the data, all right, we can save. And it's going to be helpful here too if you take your behavior and you unenable the auto update. So that way, especially if you're going to be console logging things, just makes your life easier. So the first call we're making is here's your base, all right, with that Kraken API. That's the pretty easy one, right? The API to Twitch.Kraken. And then we're going to start off with users, because if you take a look over here at the documentation, that's the first thing they give you in terms of the structure for making an API call. So I'm just going to follow their structure and see what we get, all right? And see what we get. So here I'm going to run. Open up my console log. All right. And here we go. So notice I get an object. So my object has an ID. All right. And then I have, so that's underscore ID. There's underscore links. All right. And then the links come with another object, and that is the actual link to their page. So if you don't know the link to the page or what it is, you can always check that here. There's a bio, a display name. Notice freeCodeCamp, it's all capitalized. So the display name versus their username could be different. All right, their name is just their name, and it gives you a type and the last time that they updated something. Okay, which is kind of cool. All right, so that is just the user. It's about the user. That's it. So I want to clear this. All right, so we can use that. What about what's next? Let's go to, we need to be able to check the streams, right? So if I change users to streams, oh look, stream, null, all right? Which means that there is no stream, or they are not streaming. So the good news is we can actually use this chunk of data to trigger some actions, or use that as a comparative statement for our if else, all right, in terms of what we're going to populate our main link for freeCodeCamp with, which makes our life pretty simple, which is nice. So why don't I do that? Why don't we start with that? So we can use our logic to start changing that. So let's go in here, and let me show you one more thing actually before I do that. So that doesn't give us as much data as we want. Now for myself, I also wanted to go in here and take a look at the status, which we have, but I also wanted to know the game that they are in, and what else? The game, the status, and then the user ID. I can't really get all that information if they're not streaming, right? So why don't I show you what this looks like with the streams, with that stream that I know is on. All right. So I'm going to go over here and check my completed one to see who's online here, which looks like this guy here. All right. So then I'm going to change freeCodeCamp to this, and we're going to see what this data object looks like. Save, run. All right, so this is what it looks like when he's actually online. You can see a link to his channel, the stream object. So the stream object was null, but if they are streaming, they give you an ID, any links that they have, their average FPS. They have the game that they're playing. Oh, look, we need that information, right? Okay. There's a playlist if there's a playlist, and there's also a video height and the number of viewers. Wow, 13,000 viewers. Watch you play StarCraft. That's amazing. So just so you know, that's what that looks like. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave this guy here because I know he's streaming. And then when I'm done, I'm going to change that back to freeCodeCamp. So now my console log and that data is done. I'm going to comment that out. And all I need to do here is just say if statement data.stream. Remember in our object here, let me run this again. Really? Run this again. If their data, which is this entire data object here, all right, if your stream, okay, so your data is going to be just this blank object. If the data dot stream, all right, remember if that was exactly equal to null, that means that they're not streaming, right? Otherwise, it's equal to something else. So if data dot stream is exactly equal to null, which means they're not streaming, I want to do something. And the only thing I need to do, if you remember, is I want to overwrite this little span here inside this anchor tag. That's all I want to do. And that span, remember, has an ID of FCC. So if that's the case, I want jQuery to go ahead, find FCC, and then I wanted to overwrite the HTML for whatever has that ID, which in this case is just one span, has that ID. And I wanted to change that to say string. I want to overwrite that with the string that says, has a space in there, is offline. That's it. Okay, is offline. Else, if they're not offline, then of course that means they are online. So if they are online, all right, all I want to do is do the same thing. Tell jQuery to find FCC, and I want to overwrite that HTML wherever that is, and then I want it to say is online or something like that. Close that, and there we go. All right, and that's it. So this is going to be, let's see, yep. So that right there is our first API call. I'm going to save, I'm going to clear my console, and then let's just see if this works. And I run. Oh, look, freeCodeCamp is online. Unfortunately, it's not online, but it says we're online. Why? Well, because this guy here that I put in here is online. So what happens if I change this back to freeCodeCamp, who is definitely not online? So you can see what this looks like. Control C. Control V. Save. Run. Look, freeCodeCamp is offline. Nice, right? So there we go. So now we just used a simple get JSON with the correct address. And a lot of times I was having a lot of trouble with this address. And I'm going to show you something else as well. With this get JSON method, which is a shorthand for your Ajax, all right, there doesn't really seem to be any built-in error handling. Now, I do know there is a way to do that. I was looking at Stack Overflow, but there was no way that it was obvious and easy to me anyway. So if it wasn't obvious and easy to me, I wouldn't be able to explain it very well to you. So I'm going to show you a way that was obvious and easy to me. But if you can explain the other way better, please let me know. It'd be really cool if you actually made another video to kind of clear that up. That would be extremely helpful if you actually can do that and explain it well, though. So that's the key. So right now we're still inside the main function. We are exited our first Ajax request here for our JSON data, and that works. So we're making one API call there. The next thing we're going to do is make an API call to get this data. All right. Now, here's the thing. Not all of these people up here are still active. All right. And we wanted something to happen if it's active. So if we make the Ajax, if we send an Ajax request, right, and we're looking at the JSON data, and we get to one of these users, and they're not there, there's going to be an error. So we need to know what to do with the error. Now this get JSON is just going to skip over the error and just keep going. So we want to identify and throw a flag that there is an error. So there's many ways to do this. I'm going to do this in an extremely simple way. What you can do is add like user not found and then error over here if you want. I'm just going to throw an alert just to show that it works. But again, I want you to try to be creative with this as possible. So I only really want to show you some of the basics with this and kind of give you some hints and ideas. Again, assuming that you're going to be using your own brain to kind of come up with some of this stuff, which again is the end goal of this. I don't just want you to use my ideas. So I'm going to start off. Now I want to make a bunch of calls. Okay, so I want to make a bunch of calls, and I want to iterate through each one of these elements in an array. How do we do that? Well, we've done this a bunch of times before in freeCodeCamp and all these challenges, and it was that for loop. Now, in the previous video, I kind of showed you the structure as well to this stuff that you can use. And so we're going to start off with a for loop. And all my for loop is going to do, and again, for I equals 0. We've used this a bunch of times. You should be able to do this without even really thinking about it. What did I call this? Oh, I didn't call it anything. So why don't we need to set an array to a variable. What do you want to call this variable? If you were looking for people that follow you or the people that you follow, let's set a global variable to streams, right? So var streams. There we go. A equals this. So we want to iterate through streams here. All right, do I have everything? Yeah. So var I, all right, and then I want to keep doing this as long as I is less than streams dot length, right? And then increment your I. And this is going to iterate through this entire array. What array? My array of all these users here. All right, so let's just see here. After this, everything we do from here, all right, is going to be inside of this for loop. All right, so we're going to be doing whatever we're going to do. We're going to do to every single user here. So for this next chunk, everything else is going to be inside of this for loop. All right, everything we do is going to be inside of this for loop. So I'm just going to close that off in that sentence, and I'm going to delete the space there to let us know to stay inside of this for loop. Okay, there we go. And now, so remember our scope. So we have that for loop is accessing this global variable, which is fine. This is inside of its own scope. All right, so that's its own scope. Just that right there, that piece is separate. And this piece is declare the variable is separate. And everything else we're doing is going to be inside of here. Okay, so what I want to do is I need something I want to test the basis of this for loop or every single one of these things first, and I want to filter out an error. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my data here, and I'm going to use Ajax. So jQuery, the nut shorthand for Ajax, okay, which is just dot, as you can imagine, Ajax. Remember, Ajax is the request we make, and JSON is the information that we get back, hence the get JSON shortcut there. When we do this, we need to have this sort of stuff going on here. All right, and everything's going to be in here. So I'm actually going to nest some of these. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of room here to let us know that this is where we are, and that as well. So we're inside of this Ajax. So once Ajax, actually I'm going to come up one level here. What we need for this is we need a type. All right, a type colon, and the type we're going to be using is get. All right, it's going to be a get request. It's going to ask us for a URL. Right, so we need a URL, and that URL is going to be this sort of. This sort of. Why do I say this sort of? I'll show you. Copy. Now, I don't just want to go through and access freeCodeCamp. I want to access, so I equals 0, I want to access the 0th position of this array when I do this. All right, and the way to do that is instead of freeCodeCamp, I'm going to concatenate this. So I concatenate that string. Right, and what do I want to concatenate in here? I want to add in our streams. Is that what I call it? Yeah, streams. So whatever position we are in inside of our for loop. So in this case, it's going to run this for loop for this ESLS, whatever that is. All right, and then so on and so forth. So we're going to make a separate. We're going to get separate JSON data for everything inside of that for loop, or we're going to get an error message if they do not exist. All right, so at this point now we're down to the individual stream. Okay, the individual stream. We're seeing if that stream is live. Okay, so that works. So we have this. The next we need to do is we actually need to add a header in here. So how do we add in a header? Get comma blank comma. Again, there's a comma at the end of these right there. Make sure you have that. Then we're going to need any kind of headers, and we do need a header. All right, so the header that we're going to be using is going to just say client. All right, and then that client ID header is going to have in your client ID. In my case, here's my client ID. All right, so I'm going to cut that out. Paste that here. And if you notice, I don't actually need this information now, because now this information and client ID, I'm sending to it in the header. So that's how come I cut it, and now I can get rid of this. So again, you can see that I'm sending the same information, except I'm breaking everything apart. Instead of saying get JSON, now I'm saying here's the get. All right, and then the default there is going to be JSON, and the header, which is very similar to just that question mark with client ID and then the client ID. All right, so all I'm doing is breaking this down. So you can see how the get JSON here is just a shorthand for that. Right, and the reason I'm doing it this way is so I can handle any errors. So I can do some error handling. That's all. Because the next thing, notice the comma goes here outside of the header. So headers. Oops, I almost forgot that from my headers. Don't forget that. So ask for your headers, and then we're going to come in and success. So success is similar to the done here. It's not quite the same. There's a subtle difference there, but for our purposes, it's close enough. So I use data up here just to say the freeCodeCamp data. So success here, I'm going to run a function. So if there is success, all right, if there is success, remind you, I'm just going to function, I'm going to call this data I. And I'm going to capitalize I because it's going to represent wherever this I is in my for loop. Or you say data for, whatever you want. So I'm going to say data I. And now I'm inside of this function only for the success. So this is only if these streamers actually exist. Okay. What I want is I am going to console log something. So I'm going to get rid of this console log up here since this one works. Commenting it out. I'm going to start off by making sure our for loop and our Ajax request works. So I'm just going to console.log my data I, and hopefully when I clear out my console log, I should get a bunch of different things here. I'm going to save, I'm going to run, and you should see this populate with a bunch of different objects here. Good. So let's look at this. Noobs to ninjas. No, not streaming. Whatever this guy is, no, not streaming. All right. No, not streaming. Oh, look, this guy over here is streaming. This guy over here is streaming. This guy over here is not streaming. But we don't really get anything that says error if they're not there. Because I happen to know that this guy here, all right, his channel doesn't even work. Right, he's not even active, but it's still just saying null. That's not good enough. So we're going to have to change how we're handling this. So the way to do that, all right, is we want to actually look at the channel itself. So I'm going to change streams to channels, and you're going to see the difference here. You're going to get a lot more information. It's going to be all the information about the channel itself. So cleared my console log, and now I'm going to run. All right, and you can open this, just do the same thing with this link and open it in your browser. But let's go all the way to the top. All right, so this is the object that we get back for each individual one of these. So inside of that loop or this code is being run every single time for each one of the things inside of our array here. So that's how come you get so many of these, so we can see what we're going to get. And we can actually see how to call out this stuff. So if I wanted to know, let's just say they had a commercial, I can just say data I dot underscore links, all right, dot commercial, and I would get the link to the commercial, and I can link to that. All right. What else? Subscriptions, background that we want. Look, there's a display name. So in case the display name looks different or is different than their username, we can actually use that display name instead, which is actually a pretty good idea. But we can grab that somewhere else. And look, it even tells you the base game that they use. So this guy apparently likes Farm Simulator. What else? They're mature, which means I guess he uses naughty words. All right, and so on. So let's go down and find one that I know. Where is that guy that I know is not here? All right, so I'm going to scroll down and find that guy that starts with a B or whatever. Bruno. That guy is still there. That guy's still there. I'm trying to see where the error is. Oh, look, we're missing some of the streamers. All right, we didn't get any data for them. All right, so that means it was an error and it skipped over that. Okay, so that's interesting. So what can we do? All right, I'm going to clear this again. So is that data just lost, or do we have an option to handle our error? Well, the good news is we have an option to handle our error. So remember here that this success, all right, right here, is just one other parameter that we have after that success. So once we have that success, all right, we can also go over here and say error, okay? And we can actually run a function for an error. So when there's an error, which means we're not getting any data, I want to know why. And notice that the difference between using the channels was the channels didn't bring back any information, where the streams gave us information just saying that the stream was null, whereas the channel, there was an error and it skipped over it. So that's how come we're doing the main API call here. So that way I want to see where this error is, and I want to alert to somebody that there's an error there. So error, function error, that's just the data that says it's an error. All right. What I want to do here is I am just going to throw an alert. That's it. Throw an alert that says error, user not found. Save. Run. Oh, look, user not found. Oh, user not found. So 2 users were not found, or 2 channels were not found. There you go. Obviously, in here, you could actually use that section to modify down here saying that that user is no longer available. You can use a custom picture or image that says user is not available. You can do all sorts of things with that. And that is the area in which you're going to handle your error. And you can kind of see why we needed the longhand for this one, so we can filter out that error. Okay. There's also a ton of data here and in this success. So I have this success section, all right, that now we can use. And what do we want? We want, the only thing we don't get here is the if they're streaming and the current stream, all right? So we can actually look and see if there's any other data that we cannot get with that API call we use for the streams, right? Which is what we're going to do. We're actually going to have a second API call inside of this API call just to figure out if they're streaming or not. You could just do it separately, but since we're going to use this, the method I'm using with this var I is going to loop through everything once and then append the data. All right, it is everything's not going to line up. That's only because I designed a very, very simplistic HTML and CSS to handle this stuff. That's why. All right. Because of that, I'm going to show you how to do a nesting API call, which I think is pretty good. And I'm also going to show you a very, very unnecessary way to get the username as well. Mainly because I just want to use slice again when you could just pull it off of here and display name. Okay, which you can do. You can just say display name, and at this level, before you add in the next API call, which is going to go right here. Okay, remember our scope. So here is our first API call, and that's going to happen for everything inside of there it is, inside of our streams, right? So we're going to make an API call here, 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 all the way down. And once we get this username, which we do, all right, we're going to make another API call just for that specific user to get additional information. And then we can use the shorthand that we've used above. All right, so from here, I am going to pause, okay? And then I'm going to pick this up next time because this video is getting long. And let's see here. What else can we use? Oh, look, there is a profile picture or a logo as well. And you get a 300 by 300 logo. It says it right there. So this is the point where if you want to start using the logo, you could just say data_i.logo. And you can use that, use jQuery to overwrite that somewhere at this point before you make the next API call inside of this success or underneath this console log. All right. So when I come back, I'm just going to go through and make this get this second set of data or the second API call, and I'm going to finish up the functionality of this particular project. All righty. Make sure you save that though. All righty. Well, hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you all to finish this stuff up.